Okay, hi everyone. We're back again. Quickly checking Biju, Kartik, Varun, Geetika, you can all hear me, right? Okay,
Yes.
great. Hi, welcome everyone. We are back with the Wednesday webinar this month. Today's topic is the science and the art of human behavior in marketing. Before we sort of get on to, the introducing the speakers, introducing everyone, and telling you about what this is, we want to really take a little bit of time to tell you about the intention behind the session. When we were putting our brains together in terms of that we want to have a session on behavioral sciences, behavioral economics, we were talking about the fact that there's so much buzz around it. There's so much chatter around it. But beyond the buzzword, beyond the chatter, do we fully truly understand what comprises behavioral sciences, behavioral economics? We use a lot of different terms for it. So this time around, what we've done is that the focus of the entire session is to make sure that it makes it clear, it adds depth to what you already know. We will have all the speakers talk about a lot of use cases and a lot of very practical examples to focus on the outcomes. The intention at the end of the day is to urge you all to, read more, explore more. If you're in the fence in terms of exploring behavioral sciences or alternative forms or newer forms of doing research and insighting, you must really sort of, find some sort of ground in terms of doing more in terms of that. The last bit that we definitely want to land with this particular session is that, whether we call it behavioral sciences, BE, or whichever way, it is not a niche. It is something which is very much a part of the mainstream way in which actions are being taken, the way things are being thought of. So that's the real sort of intention of the session. Next slide. Um, Also to remind you, this is the seventh season of Wednesday webinar, so we've been doing it for a while. I'll quickly also introduce the panel which manages the Wednesday webinar. We have Amitabh. Amitabh is the head of Insights and Analytics India at Dr. Reddy's. We've got Sundar, who's the CEO of SL Venture, and that's me. I work with Purple Audacity as the chief of capacity building there. Then we have Siva, who's the consumer behavior consultant at Curious Cat Consulting. About MRSI is a unique non-for-profit organization. We work across organizations that trying to create awareness of the industry among public at large as well as the government. You would see a lot of efforts being taken in terms of even policy adjacent sort of actions. We establish and promote professional standards, so there's a code of ethics, and we also try to provide a platform for professionals to engage, showcase their work, and collaborate on common issues. And Wednesday webinar is really one of the initiatives that comes under that intent. Next slide. In terms of the speakers for today, there could not have been a more, both in terms of diversity as well as sort of depth and breadth. There couldn't have been a more robust panel doing this with us today. We've got Biju. Biju is the chief evangelist at Fractal Analytics. He started out with Finalimile Consulting, and Finalimile Consulting is a part of Fractal Analytics. There would not be, dare I say, there would not be another person who can claim to go before him when it comes to behavioral sciences within India or generally globally. So he's been the pioneer of thought, pioneer of action in terms of really pushing this space. Then we've got Geetika. Geetika is the managing partner for Center for Behavioral Research at Future Factory. Future Factory is an inciting team that sits within a design agency. So Geetika is going to be talking about a lot of tech solutions and really, newer ways of doing things. Then we have Kartik. Kartik is the group CEO of Omnicom Media Group India. Kartik calls himself the student of behavioral science, a student of behavioral sciences, and really says that he's not an active practitioner, but we would like to deviate from that a bit. In terms of the last couple of decades, I think Kartik has been one of the pioneers in terms of using behavioral sciences and a real believer in it to use it for media decisions. Then we have Varun. Varun is the CEO at Behavioral Insights Architecture and Strategy, also known as BIAS. Varun also brings in a unique perspective from the point of view that Varun started out as a hardcore qualitative researcher and has made this transition. So he can also talk about the both sides of it. One of the larger intentions of the entire session today is going to be focusing on the fact that um, while we are focusing and trying on all these new things, and we will try and talk about the new approaches and new methodologies, there must be a shift in the way in which we think, act on it. There must be a shift in terms of, and we must explore new methods. So all the speakers are going to be talking about that. We will go in the following way. Biju goes first, and then we will have Varun, Geetika, Kartik. Um, just a quick couple of announcements for all the attendees. You will see that there is a question chat window here on your GoToWebinar. You would not be able to unmute yourself, but what you can do as the speakers are speaking, you can definitely put in your questions there. We will possibly, if we pause in the middle, we'll ask those questions in the middle, or at the end, we will just pose the question to everybody or the relevant speaker that you want your questions posed to. Next slide. Yes, with that, we will hand it over to Biju. Biju goes first, and Biju will talk about why marketing needs a new science of human behavior. We'll talk about we'll really try to deconstruct what this entire space is about, what does it comprise, what should we do, and without really sort of saying more about it, I'll hand it over to Biju. Biju, over to you.
Okay, Mukul, thank you. And hi, everyone. Given that the topic of today's webinar is the science and art of human behavior in marketing, is where I thought I would focus specifically on why we need a new science of human behavior. In my conversations and discussions that I used to have for classes or sessions I used to have in the 90s, I often spoke about some of the brilliant launches that I've been part of. Morgan Stanley Mutual Fund, possibly the first private mutual fund in this country, Sundaram Mutual Fund, Rexona deodorant, the launching deodorant category in India, and Axe deodorant in 99. And Kartik and I, we were colleagues launching and working on both these brands at that point of time. And I used to talk about a lot. When I came to the early 2000s, I used to again talk about the other brands I've launched in this country, Nestle Milk, Nestle, the whole other milk categories of theirs, various brands of kinetic scooters, and of course, the mother of all launches in this country, marketing launches, Reliance Infocom. Looking back now, a few decades after having launched so many brands and handled even more brands in my career, I realized one truth. And this truth, this is the truth that all the lions and tigers that you get from the beaches of Cannes beaches can't hide this truth. And this truth is that anything to do with human behavior, we have a huge failure rate. We have a huge failure rate. Marketing strategies, HR strategies. My team just studied vaccine hesitancy across multiple countries in the world. So policy making, they are failing at 75 to 90% of the time. Which means the traditional theories that describe human behavior universe with conscious, rational man at the center is just not working. So the market research techniques, the communication strategies, or the thing that we developed with this traditional an understanding of human behavior is just not working. I mean, this humongous failure rate of the existing theories of human behavior is the single most reason as to why I believe we need a new science to actually to understand and influence human behavior. And in the last 27 years, I've been sort of searching for this new science of human behavior. I came across behavioral economics. Yes, it introduced the concept of irrational man, mental shortcuts, heuristics very well. To be honest, and I've told this to Professor Taylor several times, because he used to invite me to Chicago booth to take several sessions much before he won the Nobel Prize, the 2010, 11, 12. And I used to say, I really like the work of Gerd Gigerenzer from Max Planck, because he works a lot in the area of smart heuristics. and to me, which is actually a much more powerful and very implementable things as far as marketing is concerned. But it's, to me, the most significant learning about human behavior actually came from the work of Francis Crick. Not work, obviously DNA, but his statement when he said that if we really want to understand human behavior, he said, there is something that is functioning between our ears, which is a human brain. Understand the human brain, and you actually understand human behavior. So to me, neuroscience is actually the real new science of human behavior. And neuroscience brings in huge amount of new learning about human behavior. For example, the fact that of the 11 million bits of processing that we have, just 77 of them, yes, just 77 of them work at a conscious level is a fact I don't know none of us can really believe it. But that's a biological truth. But I think this new learning has actually now dramatically changed the very construct of the human behavior universe. Because at the center of it now today, biologically, it's been clearly been proven that it's the non-conscious emotional self is the predominant factor. And I think as Shankar Vedantam, of the Washington Post, in his book Hidden Brain said, this new understanding of human behavior constitutes a revolution no less intriguing and perhaps more powerful than the discovery that the sun really does not revolve around the earth, which means all the human behavior practices that have been revolving around the conscious, rational man has to give away. And we have to create a very new way of looking at things, which means new understanding clearly needs new tools. We cannot understand the vast non-conscious processes of the human brain by using our traditional research methodologies like the focus groups and in-depth researches. For my team, a lot of learning, for example, on the non-conscious processes of the human brain actually comes from the sports field. When we try to really figure out what really happens in the brain of the person, when a batsman is in the brain of a batsman, when he's facing a ball that is coming to about 140 kilometers per hour, it tells me a lot about human decision-making process. And in the last 17 years, I think I also have realized that this 30-second commercial is not the best persuasion tool for solving the human behavior problems. Stimuli at the point of action, designed on the understanding of the non-conscious processes of the brain. Whether it's the yellow painted sleepers that you just saw right now that we painted on the railway tracks of Mumbai, or the lines that you see here that have been painted across various highways in this country as strategic points there, has gone a long way to mitigate many a human behavior problem. And I think more importantly, today when I speak, I no more have to speak about the 90% failure rate that I used to have in my career. I can tell the world that the single largest cause of death in Mumbai, which is people getting hit by a train, we have managed to reduce it by 75%. And today it's a case study in Philip Kotler's book. Or something that kills 300,000 people in this country, road accidents, we have managed to reduce it by up to 69% across various highways in this particular country. And today, my team is actually working hard what I would call the new science of microstimuli, wherein I think we're trying to combine learnings from neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and design. And I think we're trying to conquer the new medium or the medium of the future, which is of the smartphones. It's a new world that we are actually building it. I think these are really, really interesting times. And I think this is what I want to share with you. And I'm sure my fellow panelists will have even more interesting things to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Biju.
Thank you so
So,
much, Biju.
yeah,
Yes, Varun. No problem. Go on.
yeah. So I definitely concur. It's certainly an exciting time to be at the intersection of behavior science and business. But what is a behavior in a behavioral science? What is science? What kind of solutions are we talking about? Or what is the ecosystem that needs to be created? I'll just talk about these four things. So let me just move ahead. Next, please. If I talk about behavior, there are five, as we see it as. One being the suboptimal behavior. Say, for example, you're supposed to do a brush twice a day, but then you do it only once. There's a deviant behavior or a negative behavior. You forget brushing twice. What about the absent behavior that you don't believe in brushing at all? What about positive deviant, where despite all the challenges as well as the biases that you have in between, you deviate from that and you do it positively? Not only you brush twice, but also go see a dentist every 6 months, and we can learn from them as well. And what about as intended? You're supposed to do it twice and then you do it twice. So let me give you a few case studies to elaborate more on the behaviors. Moving on to the next. Yes. So this is particular case study is what was part of a UNDP as part of the SDG goal, where the intent was to bridge the intent and an action gap when youth purchase something. What was the study? The study, in the study, what we learned was young people expressed intention to show responsibility. However, the same was not reflected in their behavior when they are buying at the shop store at the point of purchase. That was a huge gap. So the interventions are underway wherein we are trying to find solution of how to bridge that gap. That was the first case study wherein we realized that there is a suboptimality in the behavior. Moving on to the next one. This was the paper which was presented last year at an MRSI, which was purely on an adoption of people going on a digital financial apps and then doing simple tasks like joining the app as well as making the transaction. Like for you and I, it is very easy to do it. We can easily join a new app, be it Paytm, GPay, or any other. But then for some people, it is very difficult. What we learned was what were the challenges which were resulted in an adoption. And then as a part of solution, what we did was we created a whole new app prototype, which was informing to the discipline of semiotics, behavioral design, and behavioral sciences. And the result that you can see here on the screen is we observed a doubling in the adoption rate compared to the app which is already there in the market. So we saw definitely working is in a test prototype. Moving on to the third case study that I want to talk about. This was done for a telecom giant, where one thing that we learned as part of this research was there was a negative or a deviant behavior which was happening. What was that? So people were supposed to recharge their pack right on the day of expiry. So when their 20-day cycle ends, they're supposed to actually do it on the very same day. However, what we are seeing was they used to wait when the pack expired, and then they used to seek for offers and discount as an extortion for the uh, recharging and then coming back to the board. That was a deviant behavior. So the result underwent, and then we've created a lot of solutions. Of course, some gained a positive outcome, which you see is 22x, but not all those were see that light of day. Not all were 22x. Of course, there were a lot of experiments which failed as well, but then that is what we've learned is the third case study that I wanted to share about. Moving on to the next one. Yes, what is science? Well, one thing it's important for us to harp on the fact is that it should definitely be done by the scientist following the right scientific process. which includes not only building the hypothesis, but also developing the tools and techniques to test those hypotheses and doing the experiment to validate or invalidate your hypothesis. Biju spoke about one point that I definitely would like to elaborate more on. For this process, you cannot rely on the tools and techniques which have been there for ages, like which are being used by traditional market research, relying only on what people are saying at an explicit level and tapping only on, as Biju said, conscious techniques like FGD or discussion or IDIs. We at Bias has started developing tools which can tap and understand implicit biases, which will tap into the unconscious or the subconscious part of the brain. I have an example here to talk about. So what's better way to understand the relationship and how Gen Z would like to look for when they are going on a relationship or a romantic relationship, as we created the whole new app, a dating app itself. Previous slide, please. We created a whole new dating app where we tried understanding the behavior when they are performing it on an app. So you need such tools which don't rely only on an explicit way of data collection, but going to an implicit way of data collection, getting an answer from the revealed choice experiments, VNet-based tests, and trade-off based questions. And you cannot rely only on FGD and ID. Moving on to the next one. What are solutions? Solution holds no value if there is no business outcome and it cannot create an impact. We say that, as Biju said, that 75% of the solution fail. We cannot only and only rely on a communication-based solution. You need a lot more solutions. Is it at the designer level where a designer will create some sort of a nudge or a navigation when a user is performing a task on an app? You need an expertise of a social and behavior change communication to change the phenomena at a societal level. AI engineers, when they are creating an algorithm, we have all of us have gone through that, say that algorithms are biased. So what can be done so that AI engineers are also trained to create the right solutions? And how about semioticians when they create science and symbols, which are part of our culture, and then creating solutions and testing those. Moving on to the next, the last part that I would like to definitely harp on and I would like to stress on is it is required to create an ecosystem both at the supply side to create jobs which are conducive for particular industry, as well as which informs about the behavior science at, so be it at the level of a behavior designer, be it level of the UI UX designer, and or an AI engineer, as the example that I spoke earlier, as well as creating a learning curve for the demand side by doing such sessions, doing one-on-ones, as well as doing a pilot testing. Here I just would like to move on to the next person. I think Geetika, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Geetika. I think thank you so much, Varun. And I think the reiteration on the part that newer methods are really required and newer ways of doing research is really required. Really appreciated. I think we also have a few questions. We will possibly about that as well. And I also have a few questions. We'll possibly cover that towards the end. But yes, Geetika, over to you.
Yeah, it's awfully exciting to hear what everyone's saying, because I think very clearly behavioral sciences has come into the play when we find that something's missing, right? And, you know, Mitali, if we can start with the first slide, the perspective here really is a case for something new, which I hear everybody else talk about as well. Our starting point is a little different because, you know, like Mukul introduced us, the Center for Behavioral Research sits in Future Factory, which is a design agency. Essentially, the company makes products, technology, and services for clients. And so our focus has always been about figuring out how to give the best insights when you're trying to do something different. And I'll just spend most of my time here starting with a quote from Steve Jobs as far back in 1997, and I'm going to use that quote because I'm sure half the people in this room weren't even born then, right? Unlike some of us, Kartik, Biju, taking our earlier discussions in board. The perspective is, this was a conference where someone actually threw a challenge at Steve Jobs, and he had just come back to Apple after his earlier failures. And he said, when you're trying to effect change, when you're trying to create $1 billion worth of product that hasn't existed before, you're tempted to look at the potential of technology or the brilliant ideas that are buzzing in your head about different features you can put into the product. And that's why innovation or new products fail. Instead, what you need to do is you need to start with the human experience and understand where that human experience is failing, and then look at plugging that tech or the ideas or the features into solving for that. And and we call it user backwards at Future Factory, inspired from the fact that you have to start the user and go backwards to what technology or products can do. It's a strange quote to put in for a consumer inciting person, but we start usually all our presentations with a Henry Ford quote that says, if I asked people what to do, I would have made a faster horse, right? So if I have to come up with an automotive, I need to be user informed, but I can't expect my users to tell me what to do. And that's where behavioral sciences come in. What I love about this slide is how beautifully the team has blended into the community. And this was a project that we did for a fintech company that was looking at understanding how that product would be adopted and used by a community that essentially hasn't been exposed to any of that tech. And it's interesting to think of the word trust when it comes to money. They're both very, deeply intertwined. But trust on a money product for an urban context would be, a CAPTCHA or a UX or some cybersecurity. But trust when it comes to money for a lot of rural folks is often about people. So what would a product do to build trust in fintech if they're likely to give their PIN to somebody they trust to make an entry on their behalf? And that's where behavioral sciences comes in. So on the next slide, we have an interesting cohort of pictures that come in. And I think our approach, maybe a good way to put that down, is our approach has always been about capturing the human experience in its more natural form. So it's always videos and photos rather than what people are saying. It's literally about what people are doing rather than what people are saying. And you can see that here, context, which is very critical. We've done a lot of work for consumer companies, especially appliances, products, tech, a lot of work in that area. It's context from two perspectives. One is the cognitive context. What are people expecting a washing machine to do? Is a very different question from saying, what are people expecting out of laundry? And the further you get to the category and further away from the product, you're really talking about the experience. So you're talking about the aspirations of people, their expectations out of laundry, their failures and misses in that process. And then you're talking about physical context, right? Where is that placed? Where is the product placed? Where are the consumable placed? Where are the clothes placed? What are the different processes in that journey? And how do you actually move from that experience to the product? And that's an interesting framework when you're examining new product design. On the next slide, we've got another interesting experience which comes out from how you might advise marketing teams as well. And here you can see how the product is just part of a larger system. And therefore, what you're talking about is system design, which is equal to product plus service, right? So this is a project, we've done a lot of healthcare projects where we've actually gone into surgeries and watched how that's happening. We've, been on in some of the public healthcare systems, where a lot of infectious diseases were being monitored and treated. And it's helpful to see that there, you're not really looking at the performance of a particular product or the viability of a particular medication, but you're really talking about how that healthcare outcome is jointly a responsibility of several people in the system. And that's where behavioral design becomes a little bit more complex, right? So now it's no longer about going and taking a picture of where your washing powder is, but understanding workflows in that behavior, mapping and decoding videos and photos that explain those interactions among people. And on the last slide, really what we've done is it takes a lot of time and money to do behavioral science as well. I mean, everyone in this room will know that you have to run multiple experiments and you can get into months of work, which very frankly, brands often and businesses often don't have the patience for. And to the point of everyone in this room, AI can somehow, help to solve that problem. So one of the initiatives we've launched is a company called Humanify. And Humanify essentially is an app that allows people to capture their experiences themselves. As you can see, the joy of riding on the right. You could put a camera on your device, on your vehicle, or capture photographs during your experience, upload those photos and videos, and AI actually using our logic that we've coded into the system translates that into insights. And now you're doing that in days and literally in hours. So I think this is a very, very interesting field. It's going to become the next way of capturing and understanding humans in their most natural form. And therefore, behavioral sciences, I think finally, the time for it is really right. But I would love to hear about the questions and comments from everyone else in the group. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Geetika. I think the one bit that I think I'm just putting it out for all the speakers, the time and the money aspect that Geetika talked about is definitely something that we'd possibly like to ask you a few questions about, because the speed, we've realized that in research in the past maybe even 3-4 years, the time of execution or the expectation in terms of execution timelines have actually significantly crunched. They were already pretty bad, now they've become extremely horrible. So we'll ask you a few questions about that as well, and tying into the context of what everybody's speaking. I'd now like to hand it over to Kartik. Kartik is going to, other than now you've seen till this point, you've seen everybody who's a practitioner really go. Kartik is going to take a point of view in terms of decision making and how to really sort of utilize that decision in media, utilize all this information and new science in media decisions and really sort of tangibilizing it, but should also serve as examples for some of you to see the entire journey from how it gets conceptualized, how it happens to how it can actually be acted on. Over to you, Kartik.
Thanks. Thanks, Mukul. Firstly, I was amazed to see the breadth of work being done across all the panelists here. Some are old friends. Very happy to see Biju, the amount of work being done. I think it's big. There's a popular saying in advertising, we are not in the business of saving lives, but behavioral science can actually save lives. So I was very happy to see some of the saving life initiatives of Biju. I've been in media for a very long time, and we deal with a lot of numbers, and there are no surprises there. But what used to, as a student of even advertising, used to bug me is that it can't be purely be numbers, right? There is reach, and there are costs and stuff like that. There must be something more. That kind of curiosity over a period of time led me to start reading a bit about what then was popularly called behavioral economics because of popular titles which got released, and over a period of time, other texts. Fast forward where we are here today. If you can go to the next slide, please. The media and advertising world. So first, before I go in, I just want to say one thing. When we say media, there will be maybe some examples, which is the thin line between media and creative. It's not going to be necessarily purely media because media will rely on creative. So see it from that lens. Behavioral science in advertising and media has been used for a very, very long time, loosely understood as psychology. Right? When we all kids from college, we just thought something called psychology, and we had one branding saying everything is something psychology. But as I started delving deeper due to my curiosity, and as you've seen panelists before me, the humongous range of new research techniques, new branches, and probably this webinar should be like a 10-hour webinar or something. People may get tired because the depth of each of the branch. Behavioral economics is lots, psychology is lots, neuroscience, as Biju said, is lots, design thinking is lot. So you can go on and on and on. The good news is all of this is available today to marketers to experiment both with the newer frameworks and new ways of experiments. That's the context in which I'm operating. Straight away getting into the, if you can go to the next slide. There are 5 use cases. There are so many use cases that when I was thinking about it, one can talk about, but something which either I have been involved indirectly or directly, I've chosen 5. And I was also happy to see Geetika talk about context. So that will be the last one I will talk about. So the first, use case is around ego depletion. For all the experts here, they know what it is. Ego depletion, first let's understand what it means. It is where people fall into temptation more often when the part of the brain that is in charge of, say, deliberative thinking. So if I'm little stressed right now, I'm going to take action in a particular way. So the use case here is for the other call out I want to make is I won't be taking any brand names because of several NDAs I am sitting on, but I'll give you a sense of the category. The category I'm talking about is a impulse food brand where they wanted to find new occasions for users of their product, and their target group was college kids. So how did we use the ego depletion? The ego depletion, there was a lot of experiments which were there. So what we did, we recruited about 200 college students, and we divided them into 2 parts, 100 each, and we put them in a central location and all that. There was some small talk, and they were called each of the student one by one, and they had to do a very simple thing. One group, which is the control group, we gave them a 2-digit number, let's say 57 or 27, whatever, and they have to go to another room and just repeat that number without writing it down, no other instruments. And if they say it right correctly, they were given $200. While giving the $200, there was a simple choice of some foods kept. There were some healthy and unhealthy foods, and they have to spend 100 rupees on buying whatever their choice. 100 rupees minimum they have to spend 100. Simple experiment. The other group, the other 100 people, it was not a 2-digit number, it was a 7-digit number. So you memorize, I will show you a 7-digit number, random number, and you just memorize it, go to the other room, say it, take your $200, buy what you want. Just the fact that the group which had a larger number to remember put that little extra, deliberative thing on the mind. And what did we find? No surprises, more impulse purchases in that group. So there were some chocolates kept and all. So very clearly now, this is fine. This is exactly what many of the experiments were done globally. We just replicated in India to ensure, because in behavioral economics, when you read books, what you will find is typically happens in college setup. Second, there may or may not be money given. Some experiments give, but we wanted to simulate as close as possible, so we gave money. So they came, they made some money, they made choices. And to Varun's point, some of this is implicit. We're not asking questions. We're just asking you to do some activity. We're not asking which brand will you buy or anything. We just observe and note. So the second group, which had to remember the larger digit number, chose more impulse products. So the implication for the brand was very clear for this this food brand was install a lot of the food dispensers in colleges in certain locations, and also stock up, increase the stock up during exam time, because you're on high stress and therefore more your what we call the ego is depleted. So very clear case. In other use cases where it's not that we have worked on it, there are moments in which I think intuitively all of us in the call will know. For food brands, let's say a pizza or whatever, there are moments, there are stress moments which one can actually go and ask a bunch of questions, or we can even use just a common sense and figure out. Say for example, lunch now, right? I'm standing between you guys and lunch. Whoever is wanting to have lunch, there's a very high possibility if I were giving you an impulse product or a not so healthy product, you will choose that. Or evening time in offices, all of you would have noted, you work late, your body is kind of ego is depleted. What do we typically order? Pizza. And so there are many use cases of so the concept of ego depletion in categories like food, and of course there will be other categories which one can try, but this is a Indian brand, a food brand which was done. So there are a lot of scheduling implications for media, right? Which time of the day, how do you schedule? You don't need to schedule through the day, so on and so forth. So that's the first one. The second one is on social proof. Social proof actually is a pretty self-evident thing. It's a phenomenon where people validate their actions by copying the behavior of others. So for example, if I go into a website and I see somebody I really respect actually endorsing that website, or there is a certification and something, there are multiple use cases in digital about this. There are various types of social proofs, case studies in B2B context. When somebody puts up a case study saying, hey, I did this, it's a social proof. Or the easiest one, which all of us will know, is testimonials. I want to buy a product. I see some happy customers saying great review about a product. It's a social proof. Hotels use this very smartly when they get reviews. So it was a great experience. I stayed in this hotel. Social media itself is a great social proof. So I write something, my experiences or my brand purchase. The other kind of social proof is trust icons. So this is certified. This product is certified by, let's say, whatever the certification association. Some of the dental brands do it. Some of the FMCG brands do it. And the another way in which you can use social proofing is also through data numbers. So many today, if you look at the food apps, they will probably, some of the food apps will tell you this is the 14,500th order of the day, and you are possibly the next order. So that is a kind of a social proof. A lot of these use cases across the board, digital, you will see this very commonly, and some of the techniques of using social proofs. The next one which I like to talk about quickly is halo effect. Halo effect is like it's a cognitive bias in which the overall impression of a person influences based on how others feel and think based on a specific trait. So someone, let's say we have personalities around us. If we believe that he or she is, so take a sportsman. He's working and making runs. Let's take cricket as an example, batsman, and a great player. We just look at that one trait and try to generalize that. So a lot of brands use this, and there are multiple use cases. When a celebrity spokesperson, there's a lot of the expectation that this person stands for this value. And same today, celebrity has been a use for many years, but today's digitally wired world, you see a lot of brands even trying to do with big influencers and even nano influencers. So some of these, they stand. There are some influencers who have 1 million, 2 million, 5 million. One very popular use case, and you can choose whichever brand you want, is popular actresses in beauty products. You think of the brand, they use this, it's a halo effect. If this actress is using it, or he or she is she is very beautiful, so probably the same effect will come out to me. It's a technique being used for a very long time. The only watch out on this technique is if you do it excessively, then there's a level of sameness. So you have to be smart on the choice of the spokesperson that you use, and don't do it excessively. Today in India, unfortunately, 7 or 8 out of 10 advertising is a celebrity advertising. So that's a watch out for the industry itself. That's on halo effect. Framing, as the word says, is how you say the same thing will have a huge impact. For example, say a food brand. If I say this is 75% fat free, I frame that product. Let's take a burger. I say 75% fat free versus I say 25%, only 25% fat. So these are the type of experiments globally done, and what we have seen is that when you frame it as a 75% fat free, the result is much better. So there are lots of ways, because the human mind goes by the framing. Even if the effect is same, 75 fat free is 25 fat. If I say 25% fat means 35, but the mind, just by framing it, and advertising uses this brilliantly. There are multiple examples in which how you frame the same offer can be framed. For example, being done by many of the print publications and even subscription. I give you three framing: $100, 100 rupees, whatever. Typically, how you frame it, one offer will always look better. Reader's Digest used to do it for multiple years. They will frame and say, many of the brands today, if you see locally, one shirt pay one shirt free, three shirt pay two shirt free, all those kinds of things. You can frame it and see which ones work best for you. So there are two things for brands, if you were to generalize and take. uh, in your messaging, focus on losses than gains. So for example, if I say you buy this insurance, you will, if you don't buy the other insurance, you will lose some money. So focus on losses, because consumers capture more losses. The second is a more important thing for say for creative people: use nouns over verbs. Say for example, if you're say OTT player, thank you for subscribing, rather than saying thank you for subscribing, you could say thank you for being a subscriber. Just that subtlety, you will start seeing some bumps. And in marketing, we have to be careful that when I say all this, it's not going to be suddenly a 50% jump. It does not happen. Even a small 2%, 3% jumps are very valid. That brings me to the last and most important: context. Thank you to Geetika. Context is a lot, at least for media. One of the famous examples, and I think all of you can go to YouTube and see it, is a famous experiment done in real life by a violinist called Joshua Bell. He's a Philharmonic violin player. He went into the subway and he was like a normal man playing. Some 1,000 people went, nobody even noticed. In a normal day, he would have made maybe 20, 30, $40,000. He's the most sought after violinist. Just because people did not recognize him in that context. The context was a subway and not auditorium. Now, what we did for media was a very interesting example for a FMCG beauty brand. We used to take a lot of spots on obviously high reach channels like the Hindi GC channel, movie channels, but often the challenge used to be, should we consider a niche channel? Because niche channel by definition did not have reach, but we had a sense or a hypothesis that possibly it works. So here is the experiment which we did, which was very simple. We had a bunch of, I think, 350 or 400 customers matched to the best, which will be the likely target group. Before the experiment started, we asked each respondent, we gave them a form saying, here are list of what are the list of FMCG products would you like to buy? And we just noted it down. And each of them were put in a central room. There were 4 groups for 4 genres. And so there was a Hindi GC, they did not know that. And we made them watch TV for 2 hours. The TV had we had simulated live programming with advertising breaks. Each group did not know we had the same client products and some other products, as if you are watching a live TV. It was carefully done. And then after you watch the thing, you got some money, $250 or something, of which you have to spend minimum 100. And there are a lot of products kept like a separate place, and we just noted down what they bought. So of the 250, you spend 100. Again, here is the aspect of making a behavioral experiment with some amount of money. Otherwise, it's theoretical, and we just noted that. And what we found were 2 or 3 very interesting things. What people started before the experiment, before watching the advertising, what they said, which products, to what they actually ended up buying. There were some shifts, no surprises there. But there were big shifts which are happening between Hindi movies and Hindi GC. We did it in 2 centers, Mumbai and Delhi. There are big shifts in Mumbai and even in Delhi. More importantly, what we found was for higher priced product, the English news and English niche channels performed well on actual purchase. So that gave us a proof that while niche channels may not necessarily come up in reach numbers, there is on actual short-term purchase. This is extremely short-term purchase, right? We are not telling them it's a live program you're watching, simulated program, and there are breaks, and you're just, they don't know which ad we are doing. So there are also dummy ads of other brands which are there. It was fascinating to see how niche channels came up. Clearly, English as a cohort came out very differently than the Hindi cohort. So, because this is something in advertising we always struggle, English as a proxy for, premium products kind of got validated with this experiment. So that is the last one on context. And currently, if you go to the next slide, there are obviously everyone has said this and I'm repeating this, there are new approaches which are needed to test whether creative or media deployment, and whether it's AI or if it is even a new framework, it's important. The good news which we are seeing is there is a lot of convergence between broadly what we are calling behavioral science and other research techniques. Recently, we've done in 2-3 markets globally a huge amount of work on attention research, and we find the role of context very important. For example, programming even in digital, which type of programming context you see can improve or decrease your attention, and attention in also impacts the final the final purchase of the product. So I'm not getting into the research of how we did that. For someone who's interested separately, we can talk about it. So even newer research technique like attention is telling a lot on how context is. All media are not equally weighted. It's not that one minute in one channel or program is equal. They are different. Attention varies, and context is very, very important. That's my last, and thank you for this.
Thank you so much, Kartik. I'll just come in now. There are a few questions here. What we'll do is that we'll take 5 minutes to just ask a couple of questions. Um, you know, and please excuse me, some of them, the question that I am definitely going to ask from my side may not be the most intelligent questions. So I'm more in terms of, trying to break it down in terms of pure execution for everybody. Um, my first question to everybody would be, and possibly Biju, I can start with you because Finalimile with Fractal, the combination of it utilizes different kind of skill sets. So the question is in that direction, and then maybe Varun would also be somebody who would also be relevant to this question because the transition, like I talked about, from qualitative to now also using other sorts of methods. My first question is really that, one thing becomes incredibly clear that there's no merit in making it a very this versus that conversation, right? It's not a traditional versus others conversation, or maybe it is. But what I'm essentially going to ask both of you to weigh in on is then what is an ideal research team in that sense? Like, is it purists in various of different kinds of different kinds of methods? Is it a mix of traditional as well as new method researchers creating a sort of mixed team of sorts? What essentially is the right kind of research team to have, and what are the benefits of it? Is it really to say that no, traditional is to be completely junked out and we must only focus on newer ways of doing things because there's definitely merit and there's definitely sort of a reduction in terms of failure rates, as well as there's just greater sort of percentages of success. So Biju, I'll first come to you with this question because I'm sure there'll be examples around this. And in case there's something doesn't sit right about the question, you can point that out as well. And then we'll possibly move to. But yes, Biju.
Mukul, I think I'm not really in favor of a bit of that and a bit of this, because that has been the problem with the psychology theories. because actually, Kartik said there are actually multiple theories with behaviorism, cognitive science, psychoanalysis, and I think and each of them had its own sets of inadequacies. But what we did was we forgo all of that and said, let's mix it into a khichdi and said, let's go and, I understand human behavior. So I strongly believe we need to call out the inadequacies of theories. So if you say that rationality doesn't exist and people don't really think in a rational way, neither the brain has the ability to, the process so much information, nor the time to do it, then I think it's clear. We'll have to focus on heuristics and understand the heuristics around it. Or if consciousness that we believed was such an important factor, and studies after studies are showing is that we are not conscious of why we did what we did. There's no point in asking questions to them. So I think when we did it, when we developed a new research methodology called Ethno Lab, we discarded all of it, and we just developed a completely a ground-up research technique called the Ethno Lab. And I think the world heard of it and sort of acknowledged it because several SOMAs, SOMA Dublin, SOMA New Orleans, SOMA Tokyo, when the best case study came from the world said, oh, this is interesting. So I'm for when something is not working, keep it away. So you can't, so clearly, Finalimile will never do a 30-second commercial because to me, context is very important. Because if you want to influence human behavior, be at the context and be at the point of action. You cannot be speaking something 1 week earlier because the forgetting curve of the brain gets in. And I think all study shows me that I think there's a forgetting. Now, someone can argue with me. So we said we'll only do what we call point of action communication. So that's one. Two is when you asked about the research teams, we took another decision and we said the team that works and designs are the team that will do the research. So we don't ever give out a research to an external party. The strategic team and the designers who work on it are the team that does the research. So railway, for example, along with me, my designers spent thousands of hours on the railway tracks of Mumbai before we developed the solutions. So I believe the research team should be the team that actually works to solve the problem.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, Biju. Varun, over to you.
Yeah, if I may, I have 3 points to just talk about this question that you asked. The first being the methodology expert. Of course, I'm not saying this versus that. Of course, you definitely need in the team of qualitative and quantitative experts who can help in collecting the data. That's one side of it. The second is time and again, we've invested a lot in having scientists who are disciplined experts, so to say, academician, from cognitive psychologists to neurologists to design thinking experts, as well as semiotician, and also having sociologists and psychologists on board. That's the second. The third and the last point is it's about creating the solutions and testing it to see finally there are some measurable results. So not qualitative, but testing those experiments with large sample to see the final measurable results and measurable outcomes. So that is an important aspect if I talk about it as a process, what we follow. As Kartik's point is, yes, a lot of choice experiments at the point of action is important for us to do those experiments and then testing to see if there are statistically significant results or not. So yeah, that's what it is.
Got it. My next one, which is the last question, of course, I would have loved to ask at least a couple more, but I'll ask this to everybody, and it's a two-part question. First is that, we're in a very weird time where wiki knowledge combined with the absolute overconfidence of the fact that there's nothing that we can't make sense of just by reading, which is really sort of prevalent. So I just go around to all the speakers and ask that if somebody was to really develop depth of knowledge and really sort of start understanding, behavioral sciences, what is it? What would you suggest to them in terms of reading, in terms of action, etc.? And now I'll leave that answer to you. The second part of the question is that, and they're separate questions really. I wanted to be optimal in terms of time. Second is that, typically in very typical traditional research, we work with a lot of inciting teams, marketing teams. Now the problem there is that the turnaround time sometimes look like 48 hours, 72 hours, 96 hours, like somebody is wanting the outcome of a research in 4 days. In that place and in that space where the limitation is known, everybody is acting with the limitation, knowing fully well that this may not be the best answer to this, but this is possibly the fastest sort of answer to this, and there is an acceptable sort of range of error that they're okay to operate with because time is of essence. In that, does behavioral sciences also become applicable, or time, or taking the time and really taking a very simulation based approach is very, very foundational to it? Without it, it can't happen. So I'm saying that essentially when timelines are that crunch, 3-4 days, uh, then would traditional methods sort of take over, or would the behavioral science methods, all the different kinds of techniques that we're talking about, would they still remain relevant? Of course, some of them will, because they also would work with typically the same kind of timelines. So yes, we can start. I think we can start with you, Kartik. Whichever, definitely answer about
Yeah, yeah.
building depth of knowledge, and then second one is optional, really, whoever wants to answer that.
No, I'll try and answer both very quickly. I'm aware of the time. First is, I think not not being a specialist in some way helped me remain curious. Read whatever you can. If you can do formal courses, by all means, one must do. There are now very interesting courses from some fantastic universities. If you can spend the time, you should do that. But my personal journey and experience has been, you read, take it, and don't judge it. Actually go back and do those experiments. So when you do those experiments, for example, what we spoke to you about, the ego depletion, in the actual experiment, there was, I don't remember seeing any money being given. But if you don't put that filter, and you should be willing to fail. We could have failed terribly. I would not know. And while you read, don't blindly also accept everything, because many of these studies, at least on behavioral economics, which I would have read a few books, are in certain context of college. Typically universities, Harvard would have done something, but in real life, will it work? The best way is to test it, and you test and learn. So that's the first part. And read and be open, and be also be willing to say, hey, and that's why I agree with Biju. We've also done some work on neuroscience and all, and when he spoke of neuroscience, that was, oh, great to hear that. The field is very wide, and one has to be curious and spend time. On the second one, I'll give a general answer. This is a problem with marketing. We expect a brand to be there forever, and we need answers in some 2 weeks. It's bizarre, and it is okay to get wrong answers, but shareholders expect the brand to have $1 billion or $1 trillion. Why would you not give the time, whatever it deserves, whether it's 2 weeks, 2 months? Do that process right rather than doing it wrong multiple times. This is not a tick mark, and if any research person is doing a tick mark, I think they seriously need to do. And if obviously we are all sitting and there is always a gun behind our head saying I need it tomorrow, uh, you will produce bad work. And if that is okay, there is a reputational risk for people producing, because you'll have to do it again. So my general answer on anything, certain things require time, and behavioral science experiments probably need that innovation, creativity to think through. There may be a framework, there may be an experiment, but you may have to adapt to a local condition. It might have developed in, say, US, but there may be certain conditions. You have to work with experts, find the solution. Biju spoke about the railway thing. Why he could have, if I were a client and go and say, Biju, can you do it in 5 days? The short answer is, yeah, he can give me something, but it may not necessarily solve the problem. It is a, don't do a tick mark. Either do a damn good job, and which will then be a sustainable thing for all of us to learn and repeat. That's it.
All right, Geetika, I'm going to quickly come to you. Quickly, everyone, because of the interest of time, just think about your answers. Yes, Geetika.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I agree and disagree with what Kartik is saying. First off, I think quality is critical, so I totally agree with him. I think there's no point in coming up with an insight that's a checkbox. There's enough research reports all of us have seen that are giving you all the data but zero insights. And there's a big difference between putting data and putting real actionable insights that you believe can cause change. So quality is critical. If you can't do something in the time the client wants it, walk away. I would do that any day. Having said that, I think being a purist doesn't help, because we live in a TikTok generation. We live in a generation that has ADHD and is fast trying to keep up. I think the solution lies with trying to, and I would say that probably because I'm biased because we're doing this ourselves, but I would say try to find technology to help us keep the quality faster. We may not have the luxury as behavioral scientists to do work the way we want to on the pace we want it to. And if that's going to be the case, we need to find a newer way to deliver quality, right? And if those timelines don't look possible with what we have on the table, it's better not to do it. That's one perspective. On reading, I mean, I totally agree with Kartik. There's so much stuff on the internet, right? I mean, you just type 30 behavioral tools and you will get most of what Kartik said, plus a dozen more like anchoring, etc. So I think YouTube and the internet is a great place to work when you're looking at specifics. But I particularly love Theodore Levitt, the guy who said people don't buy a drill, they buy a hole. And he said that like 50 years ago. So some of those early thinkers, I think, have a lot to offer.
Right. Thank you, Geetika. Varun, I'll come to you next, and Biju will very fittingly let you just sum it up for us. Yes, Varun.
So, in agreement with what Kartik and Geetika said, definitely there is a merit required and should be given a due time. You can do it faster in some case or some context. So there are say quick commerce, etc. They're doing it. So what they're doing is they're creating solutions and they're testing it right then and there. I mean, there are faster ways of going ahead about it as well. But then it all depends on what is the particular problem statement and what is the subject. You can do quickly, create solutions and test it. Yes, some of those would work, and we've seen those work in, say, specifically in quick commerce and other spaces. But then the context is important, as I said, which category or which particular subject that you're studying. Yeah.
Okay, Biju, I'd like to ask you to sort of wrap this up, but my question, I'll possibly tweak the question a bit. With so much available on the internet, the risk is that everybody believes that we can all read. Of course, I have that same misconception that I can read and maybe then claim to know sort of human behavior. Is there a way to really build depth very meaningfully in your view? I'm not negating the fact that there's of course access to resources and people must definitely experiment and dabble. That is definitely something I am in agreement with also. But your view on this, and then I think we'll just, with that we'll end. Of course, a couple of announcements I need to make. Yes.
No, one, because human behavior is the most complex thing in the world, just the human brain itself. And two, what I have seen is there are a lot of individuals who've done extremely good work. And there's no one book or one thing that can actually give you a complete understanding of what happens. So collection of knowledge from various places is actually important. And I think there's no doubt about it. So you have, those are lying in books. So you need to do that. So for example, at Finalimile, we created a ritual and which has been on for the last 17 years. Every Monday, wherever any Finalimile person is, between 6 and 7, they come in to say, what is that I read about human behavior, which is interesting in the last 1 week? So we need to have corrective rituals that bring in learning, because one person reading is not enough. So reading books and collecting information from different places, combining it and making sense of it has to be an integral part of the process of the organization that you're in. So that's something which is, and there has to be an ongoing process, because there will be so much of new knowledge that is coming in. And I think there has to be a way to absorb it, a way to combine it, and make sense out of it. And that's very, very important.
Got it.
And as far as the time is concerned, there's one more thing I just want to tell you. One of the things we looked at is if we can look at fundamental human nature, they remain the same across the world. And a lot of work is happening. So for us, railways. Okay, why do people get hit by a train that they can see coming in? And we said that's because people can't judge the speed of large objects. Now, that's an independent study, and that's a fundamental thing that happens across the world. And the solution was, okay, people can judge the speed if you give them a reference point. And these are what I call fundamental truths. And these fundamental truths, once you learn it, then you don't need to do major researches to test that. So one of the things I ask is, below the threshold of culture, which is about 50,000 year old, there is human nature, and a lot of work is happening in that area. And that is universal. And so if we can really learn that, you don't need to do major research to really understand why a problem is happening or why a solution happens around.
Right. Thank you so much, Biju. I think this has been one of the most insightful sessions that we've had for a while. I can definitely tell all of you that. I definitely need to make a couple of announcements. I would first like to thank everybody who sort of stayed in for an additional 10 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. And to all the speakers, thank you so much for your time and so much, so many examples that we've sort of really talked about. And really our hope is that it stops being thought of as a niche science which is only experimental and only in certain spaces, and definitely people feel the urge and the need to really do more, learn more, and act more on it. Our next Wednesday webinar, which is going to happen next week around the third or the fourth week, will come with the exact details. Is going to be about how insights is helping decision making in the healthcare industry. So that'll take a completely sort of different approach in terms of how actual actions are being sort of shaped and what is the kind of impact of it. So watch out the space for that. Next slide. One last thing that we definitely want to plug in and talk about here is that we're back with the 32nd annual market research seminar year after year. The entire sort of the scope of the seminar has been increasing. More and more participants have been there. Last year it was a great success. In fact, Varun and Bias had won the best paper award at the last seminar, so it's only fitting that he's here. So early bird registrations are open now, and they will be open till about 16th of August. In fact, between today and yesterday, there have been announcements in terms of what is going to be the line of speakers, what are the different kinds of papers that are there. So we'd urge you to go and check MRSI's LinkedIn. One quick thing before everybody sort of, we all go off. There may be some questions, and this is to all the speakers, there may be certain questions that may not have gotten answered today, and there may be some that may come in later. We will send that across to you if you can spare some time and help us with that. And to everybody, the recording for this particular session will be available both on the MRSI website as well as our YouTube channel. So feel free to share it. I would urge all of the speakers to share it as much as they can. And to all the attendees also, please go rewatch, share it as much as you can. And with that, we will bid goodbye for today. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. I'd like to thank all of you again. Thanks. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.